I love that thought that Elijah is just like, run, Elijah, run. And he just starts legging it. He runs all the way ahead to this place, Jezreel, to get ahead. He is full of the Spirit. He is full of faith. He is full of excitement. It's an amazing little moment in his life. And yet, just a little while later, just a few verses later, he is sat under this bush moaning to God. He's like, I've had enough now, Lord. I've had enough of all of this. I wonder what has happened to this man to go from full of faith, supernatural, Forrest Gump running to sitting under a bush moaning. How has he soared so high and then plummeted so quickly? Well, I want to suggest that that's something we all can do, and we all often do. We're full of faith one minute, and then we are fed up the next. And I think that the reasons we see scattered around 1 Kings 19 actually are often the same reasons for us as well. So let's have a little look at some of the reasons that perhaps Elijah ends up in this place. Firstly, 1 Kings 19 verse 2, he was threatened. He was threatened. Queen Jezebel has come along to him and just said, basically, I'm going to kill you, Elijah, if I get my hands on you. Now, that's quite an extreme situation. He was like totally threatened for his life. It wasn't sort of what's the word? Metaphorical. Is that the word I want? You're just looking blank at me, aren't you? It was like a real threat. She would have gone through with this. And probably for most of us, that's not a threat that we go through in our lives on the whole, but we do come across nasty people and horrible people who would say threatening things or horrible or nasty things to us. And there's nothing like someone being horrible to send your faith levels plummeting and to becoming really fed up and saying, I've had enough of this, Lord. Doesn't take much at all, does it? Last Sunday, Pentecost Sunday, we're all in here, aren't we? Having a Pentecost shindig. We're all like, more Lord. Yeah, like worshiping the Lord. It's fantastic. All it takes is from that faith-filled moment to walk out to your car and find that some hoodlum has driven past too fast and has knocked your wing mirror off. And suddenly you're like, why me, Lord? I've had enough of this now, Lord. We go from faith to fear to in a flash when something horrible happens. It happens so quickly to us, and that faith can be just stolen away. But he wasn't just threatened. He then becomes afraid as well. So verse 3, fear sneaks in, and fear can come out of nowhere. We're doing well, we're full of faith, and it's great. And suddenly, fear sneaks in. So just imagine it's Friday afternoon at work. You've had a great week. It's been such a good week. You're there, you're looking forward to the weekend. You're joking with everyone, you're laughing, you're smiling. It's all good fun. You're thinking about what you can do for the weekend. And then your boss opens her office door, sticks her head out and says, I need to see you first thing Monday morning. It's really important. It's really serious. Suddenly, fear fills your life. All that fun, all that joy, all that even faith you may have had is suddenly gone because you are suddenly ready for the fact you think you're going to be sacked or something on Monday morning. So your weekend is ruined. Fear can replace faith in a flash for all of us. You can go to the doctors about something you thought was really like nothing-y, sort of a bit innocuous. You think, I'll just go and see the doctor. And the doctor says those words, let's just do some tests to rule out anything serious. And you were like, well, I wasn't even thinking it was serious. I assumed it was just some antibiotics and then we're all right. But actually fear suddenly replaces faith and everything else that's in your life in a flash. Most of us can get from faith to fear so quickly. That wasn't all that was going on for Elijah, though. He was tired. This is a really human passage of Scripture. He was physically tired. It said verse 5 there, but it's not just verse 5. I think it's 3 times in this passage. Elijah has to lie down and go to sleep because he's exhausted. It might have been because of all that supernatural running he's been doing. Maybe he's physically tired. Maybe he's just emotionally exhausted. He's just worn out. I mean, I'd be tired probably if I was him. And the truth is, for a lot of us today, is we're tired. We're exhausted. Do you know we have more leisure time than any previous generation, and yet most of us never really rest. So we're tired. Because we've got social media, we've got TV, we've got all these things coming our way constantly. Do you know what? Well, you do know this, but what I do to relax, to rest, I watch a murder on TV. Like, not real ones, that would be weird. Like a police drama. Like, there's nothing like a mass shooting just before bed, is there? Just to, like, cause you to really rest and relax. Not. And of course, we all end up watching videos on YouTube about nothing for hours on end, or Instagram or TikTok, whatever it might be. I don't take my phone into my bedroom, but I know lots of people do, and just sit up for hours at night because the videos just keep firing up. I've told you before about I like watching videos about sharks. It's just random. I like watching videos about planes landing in the wind. Like, so many of them. It's amazing what they can do. Like, they come down, they crab, I think, don't they? And they land. It's amazing. Recently, I've started watching a lot of videos about rough seas in the North Sea. Anybody else doing that? Do you want one now? They've always got this theme as well.
All hands, hoist the colors high. Heave ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die.
There's loads on the internet. Like, how many of you are now tempted to go home and just start watching some of those? There's loads, and they've all got that soundtrack in the background. It's great. So we get tired because we're just not resting. Like Elijah, we don't rest. And tiredness changes our mood. It's a very human thing, but we are humans. Not just that, Elijah was hungry. We know he's hungry because he feels a lot better when he eats. And it happens a couple of times, again, in this passage. He's a very hangry man, isn't he? He gets sort of upset when he's hungry. A lot of us find ourselves in that kind of situation. We can get a bit down when we're hungry. We can think that maybe Satan's having a right go at us. It's like the worst thing ever. But actually, we're just tired and hungry. It's all right, John, no one spotted you. It was the bending down was what did it. Because that no one noticed. We're physical people. Sometimes we attribute spiritual reasons to everything, but sometimes we feel low because we're tired and we're hungry. One last thing that was affecting Elijah was this. He was alone, or at least he thought he was alone. He felt alone. 1 Kings 19:10. It actually starts by it being his own fault, because he sends his servant away. He says, you wait here, and I'm going to go off into the wilderness myself. Sometimes we do want to be on our own. But sometimes we want to be on our own just for effect. We want to have a little moan, don't we? We actually want to have that under the broom bush moment of having a moan. We update our Facebook status saying, I feel so alone. And it's designed to make everybody respond to us and say, oh, you're lovely, I love you. And all of these things conspire together in Elijah's life to make him feel fed up, depressed, ready to give up. Threats, fear, hunger, tiredness, isolation, they all come at once and make him feel like he doesn't want to go on. He's had enough. In fact, he says something to God in verse 4 that maybe many of us, or many of you have said yourself to God. He says, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. You may not have said the last bit, but the take my life. It's not necessarily that you're considering taking your own life, but you wouldn't mind it if God took it for you, because you get to that point. I've had enough. And so Elijah has gone from hero to zero in a flash, in a really quick time. And what I just want to think about now, just for a couple of minutes, is how does God then respond to Elijah? How does the Lord come to Elijah in this moment? Because I think what happens here is helpful for us, because I think it's the same way that the Lord would come to us in these moments as well. I got 3 quick things for you. They all start with C. which is not quite true. One of them starts with a Q, but it sounds a bit like phonetically like a C. So we're going to go with it. All right. One of you clever bods will tell me afterwards a word that I could have used that starts with C, but I don't care. So here we go. What happens first? God is quiet towards him. God is quiet towards him. The response of God to Elijah in this moment is not loud and abrasive. He doesn't come and shout at him. He doesn't rebuke him. He simply asks Elijah a gentle question. What are you doing here, Elijah? And then he allows Elijah to give a fairly stupid answer. So Elijah comes back and basically says, look, Lord, I've been really on fire for you. I have been amazing. Like, you wouldn't believe how good I've been, Lord. But no one else really loves you as much as I do. And now they want to kill me. I'm the only one left. And it's horrible and I hate it. And I'm going to eat worms and it's just awful. And he has this moment. That was a paraphrase, by the way. That wasn't exactly what he said. And I am so thankful to God that he allows us to say stupid things to him and he doesn't judge us for them. There's a fantastic verse in Mark chapter 6, I think, or 5, when Jesus is going to heal Jairus' daughter. Jairus' daughter is very poorly. He's a synagogue ruler. And he's on his way. And before he gets there, he ends up having to heal the woman with the issue of blood. And so some people come to Jesus and they say to him, don't worry about it now because Jairus' daughter has died. There's no point coming. And there's a great verse where it says, Jesus says, ignoring what they said. Tricky door. It says, ignoring what they said. I love it when Jesus ignores what we say, like much of you are doing to me now. But Jesus says, don't be afraid, just believe. You know, once Elijah has had this sad moan to God, God comes gently and quietly in a whisper to him. That's how God responds to someone who's sad, who's low, who's fed up. I mean, after all, that is how we would speak to each other, isn't it? If you come across someone who's feeling sad and low, who's a bit fed up, you don't come and just shout at them, do you? You don't come and say, hello, what's wrong with you? Like, that would just be weird and horrible. We get alongside people, put an arm around them and just say, you all right? And we have a gentle chat with them. And God is no different. He's no different to Elijah. He's no different to us. In those moments of intense sadness, of sorrow, where we're fed up and we don't know what's going on, where we're tired and we're hungry and we're afraid and it's all happening around us and we don't know what's going on, God comes in that gentle whisper to us. Towards the end of our sermon, we're going to take communion together and we want to create a quiet moment where maybe God can just draw alongside all of us today, just in that quiet, gentle whisper. And it's my prayer that he'll speak to all of us today. So God is quiet towards Elijah, but as a second thing, God commissions him. This is really interesting. Well, I think it's interesting when you look at it is that God doesn't just come and comfort Elijah. He doesn't just come and speak quietly and gently to him. There isn't just a moment of experiencing the presence of God. There is that, and that's really important, but it doesn't just stop there. What's really interesting is that after he's come alongside him, he then says the same question to him again. He says, what are you doing here, Elijah? He's already asked that question once. He comes back and says, what are you doing here? And Elijah answers the question again in exactly the same stupid way that he answered it the first time. So he says again, I've been really zealous and I've been amazing and no one's left. I'm the only one here and it's awful. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes we can have an experience with God and we're still just as moany afterwards. We're still just as miserable afterwards. That's an interesting thing. But what happens next, I think, is significant, because what happens next is that God comes to Elijah and commissions him with a new task. He gives him a new job, if you like. He says, go and anoint a couple of people. Go and anoint this person to be king and this person to do this. Go and be the prophet of Israel again. I love that. God has come to Elijah twice and said, what are you doing here? And twice Elijah has moaned his response. And God then just comes and says, okay, go and do what I've called you to do. Go and do what I've called you to do. And I just wonder whether some of us, me included, we keep bringing the same complaints to God. We want him to change everything. But actually the answer maybe he's giving to you and me today is go and do what I've called you to do. Take some action. Go and be the person I've called you to be. What's he called you and me to do? Well, in a general sense, he's called us to live a life that honors God in every single situation we find ourselves in. To live a life of worship. To live a life that's marked by love and kindness and goodness and grace and hospitality. To live a life that's defined by justice. To use spiritual gifts. To see the fruit of the Spirit develop in our lives. These are the things that he's called us to do. To come and pray for the sick and for those who are not healed, to care for them. To tell everyone the good news about Jesus. And so I wonder today, maybe if you're in a situation where you're feeling sad, feeling low, I wonder maybe gently that God is gently coming alongside you, but in the midst of that, he is calling you to action. He's saying to you, go and be who I've called you to be. You know, when you're feeling low or sad, just humanly, it's great when someone comes and puts an arm around you. It's great. It's lovely. Someone says, I'm here with you. We all need that. But actually, you can't stay in that moment forever. We have to get on. And I think maybe God is calling some of us to do that. He's saying to you, I've put my arms around you. I have gently whispered my presence to you. Now go and do what I've called you to do. And so my prayer this morning, again, as we take communion at the end of our service, is that maybe as God whispers gently to us, he may also recommission some of us to go and do what he's called us to do and be the people he's called us to be. Last thing for us. God connects Elijah. He connects him. In Genesis chapter 2, when God creates humankind, he says something really important. He says it's not good for man to be alone. So he creates Eve. Now, we apply that to marriage a lot, but actually it applies to all humans in all relationships. We are made to be in community. That's why we got God, his Father, Son, and Spirit. He's perfect community, and we're made in his image. So we're made to be in community, and that's why God has made the church. Like, you can be a Christian without coming to church, but you shouldn't be. It's not good for you, and it's not good for us, because we miss each other. We need each other to help each other. We should be part of this community. And so for Elijah, who feels like he's on his own, God now comes to him, and we get the first hint of something God is doing, because he says, go and anoint Elisha. First time we've heard about Elisha. Elisha will become his little mate, his little follower, his protege, his mentee, this guy that's going to go with him and receive this double sort of portion, which we'll read about later. And at the end of this chapter, we didn't read it, he will come to the point where he meets him properly. But at this moment, it's a hint that he's going to be with this person. And I want to say that we all need an Elisha in our lives. We all need an Elijah in our lives. Particular people who will walk alongside us and carry the load with us, just like Elisha does for Elijah. Individual, particular people. Fellow believers. And so if you don't have an Elijah or Elisha relationship going on, I want to pray that again that will happen. That God will start to connect you with people. Because it's those people who help to lift us out of the I've had enough, Lord moment. They carry us along. And if you notice, it's actually in the verse after we finished reading, Elijah immediately heads off to find Elisha. There's a bit of action involved in it. Don't just sit there and wait for Elisha to come to you. We have to go and find him. We have to go and create it, if you like, connect with people. This kind of friendship is not passive. There is some pursuit, some effort. Looking around this room and thinking, you know what? I like that person. I'd like to be friends with them. So muscle alongside and just say it. I'd really like to be friends with you. and spend some time with these people. I love it when I get to come and spend time with all sorts of different people, and it's just something amazing. You just connect with people, and God just lifts you out of situations. And of course, it's not just Elisha here, because God says to Elijah, just remember, you think you're on your own, but actually there were 7,000 other believers. How many times have you said, I'm the only Christian? You're at work. I'm the only Christian at work. You might be in your office, maybe, but there's thousands of other Christians around us. One of my first jobs out of uni was at Prudential, and there was one other Christian in the office. He was called Steve. I've mentioned him before. He was a Christian nudist. Yes, a Christian nudist. I didn't know they existed, and I have a feeling they shouldn't exist. And at weekends, he would go onto his Christian nudist camps. And sometimes he'd bring in brochures. Like, nobody wanted to see the brochures of that. And then people in the office would say, oh, you're a Christian like Steve. Like, no, I'm a Christian not like Steve. It was an awkward time. Those times when you wish you could say, I'm alone in the office, but God has connected you with someone else. I've often wondered what Steve's doing now, but I don't really want to know. God always has his people. And so even when we feel alone, God has his people for us to connect with around us. So here, my prayer today is, in a moment we come to this table towards the end of our service. We're going to come to this bread and to this grape juice this morning and just have this moment together. My prayer is that in this moment, all of us would hear and experience the gentle whisper of God's voice, of God's presence here. You may not hear it audibly. The gentle whisper of God is just him drawing alongside us and being here with us. And my prayer is that all of us may know that maybe you've never known that before. Maybe you're not a Christian here this morning. You're not a believer fully. Well, you can come to him now and give him your life. The Bible talks about repentance, saying sorry for your sin and just turning your life around and following him. And my prayer that this morning you would do that, and then you can take this communion with us, and that God would draw alongside you. And for all of us, wrap his arms around us, bring us comfort. But my prayer is also that in the midst of that, we wouldn't want to try and live in that moment forever, but that we would hear the recommissioning of God. Go and be and do all that I've called you to be and do. And that as we serve each other, remember, it's why we serve each other. You don't come to the front generally to take it from me, because you don't need a priest. We serve each other this communion. That we would realize and recognize that we're not in this on our own. We are God's people together, God's community together, and that may strengthen us. So this morning, if you're in a moment of just saying, I've had enough, Lord. I've had enough of this. Well, I pray that God will meet you this morning. Let's just close our eyes, shall we?